This episode of the CMO Suite is brought to you by Uconnect. Uconnect provides digital solutions and teams to brand CMOs, VPs, and marketers looking for true transparency in the biddable media space. From paid social and PPC to complex platforms like The Trade Desk, brands from across the world have connected to Uconnect. Visit them today at uconnect.com. And No Kid Hungry. We're proud to promote No Kid Hungry and their many initiatives to help kids in need of meals. No Kid Hungry helps kids be kids, not be hungry. Visit them at nokidhungry.org. And finally, we're proud that Season 3 of the CMO Suite is presented by the CMOcouncil.org as their official marketers podcast. The Chief Marketing Officer Council is the only global network of executives specifically dedicated to high-level knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and personal relationship building among senior corporate marketing leaders and brand decision makers. The CMO Council's 15,000 plus members control more than $550 billion in aggregated annual marketing expenditures and run complex distributed marketing and sales operations worldwide. For more information on membership, visit thecmocouncil.org. Let's start the show.
You're in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know. Presented by Connectivity Holdings.
Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the CMO Suite. It is Sean Halter. I'm your host. As you know, the CMO Suite is brought to you by Connectivity Holdings. I am excited to have with us today Stacey Horton. Stacey, it's always a pleasure to see you.
It's great to be back, Sean.
Can you
Halter?
believe it's been 3 seasons? I thought my break was longer, and they've now sent me back to work again already.
Season 4.
Season 4 is upon us. We are in New York City. We are at iHeart Studios. We are again with our good friend Bill Plax. They seem to keep letting me come back. I'm not exactly sure why, but they haven't locked me out quite yet, and I'm excited because for Season 4, maybe it's because we had really good guests in Season 3.
Amazing.
Some people that said yes that we were like, oh, really? You'll do the show? I was excited about that.
High bar.
And you just heard the voice of one of the guests that we asked last season. We were unable to work his schedule out there, but we were able to squeeze him in, and I'm extremely excited. It is Gene Foca. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at Getty Images. Gene, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Listen, we talked to you. We talked to your publicist a little bit last year. We know that you are a busy man. You travel, it feels like from time to time, but for some way, somehow, literally your publicist finally either got tired of me like emailing her and saying, when can he be on? And she finally just said, okay, we can squeeze him in today. And literally you're here in the flesh and in person. It's amazing.
Here I am. By the way, that intro sounded very much like Laser Rock.
Laser Rock.
You remember that from years ago? I'm dating myself.
It's all right. Listen, sometimes I date myself and then my wife gets mad at me. So, you make it all work. Gene and I have agreed on a couple of ground rules. One ground rule is that he said, we're going to talk about sports at some point today, which means thank God Stacey is here because I know so little about sports. But we also get to talk about his journey and his time at Getty Images. And there's some really cool stuff that I want to get into a little bit later in the show that you guys are doing specifically at Getty Images. I've used your product for many years. As my long-term listeners know, I own a holding company. We've got a bunch of different companies that are within there, and one of them is called Creativity Multimedia, and they use Getty stuff all the time. But you guys are getting into the data space now as well. You're doing some really kind of cool and interesting stuff that I'm sure you are excited about.
Yeah, no doubt. Getty has been a data-driven company for a long time. And over the past few years, we've really ramped up our data scientist team in the marketing area and really integrating predictive modeling and data science in terms of optimizing our digital marketing, in terms of how we deliver leads to our global sales team. So yeah, making good use of that team.
And that must be, again, something interesting. I don't know if it's something that was already kind of in the works before you ended up getting there. You spent a chunk of time, really, I think maybe the longest part of your career was at Time Warner. Am I correct?
Correct.
And so you were kind of already in the media space to some extent. You did a bunch of different things for them. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Indiana or did you grow up in New York City?
No, I grew up in and around New York.
Okay.
And literally only college and graduate school and a couple of years in Seattle have I spent outside the area.
So what side of New York did you grow up on? Did you grow up in Queens? Did you grow up in Brooklyn? Where'd you grow up? So we can make sure we don't talk bad about that part of town.
My dad's a Brooklyn boy. My mom is from Western Long Island, Long Beach, Long Island, and I was born in Queens.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, we hit the trifecta there, didn't we? Brothers and sisters?
One older brother.
And what's he do?
He is an infectious disease specialist for Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center.
He's in high demand these days, I would assume, huh?
Yeah, he's pretty much been in high demand his entire career.
Yeah. And so you grew up there, and what took you outside of the state for college? Was it you just were ready to kind of get out of the city a little bit?
Started with Adrian Dantley. So when I was young, I was a college basketball fan, and
Yeah.
I was really smitten with Adrian Dantley.
Here comes the sports. We're not even 3 minutes in, and he's already dropping sports things. in
AD
there.
was a
Go ahead.
superstar for Notre Dame, and I was like, wow, Notre Dame, like that seems like the school. Most people get attracted to Notre Dame because of the football,
Sure.
but for me it was AD, and then I literally followed my best friend from high school, who's a year older than me, who went there, and
That was
really
it.
enjoyed it. Yeah,
So you finished school, and then fresh out of school, is that where you ended up working directly at time?
Pricewaterhouse. Yeah, no, I started my career as an accountant, as all good marketers do.
We actually talk to a decent chunk sometimes of CMOs that have an accounting background to some extent. And maybe it's just because you keep an eye on the numbers, or I'm not sure. What do you think that is?
Well, I actually wasn't trying to be
You were not being
funny
facetious.
or facetious. I think any data-driven discipline is the best start for marketing. I think people have a misperception about what marketing is.
Agreed.
Marketing is a series of disciplines, all of which come together in running a business. It's basically the overall discipline of making sound decisions in being customer focused, having a value proposition for your customers, serving your customers well, and completing that journey end to end so that you can drive revenue and profits. That's the discipline of marketing, and it's basically the discipline of being a general manager.
And you kind of summed that up in a 30 or 60 second kind of outline of it, but that's
So now we can talk sports.
yeah. When you strip it down, that's really what it is. And there's
It
no.
really is.
I feel like sometimes, not to get too heavy into it, but I feel like sometimes everybody's looking for this magic unicorn, whether that's an agency that has every single answer to things, or they decide to have a separate digital company, or whatever it is. But it takes so many different disciplines.
It's a series of disciplines that come together to complete the whole.
And are we getting buried to some extent with, you need data because it helps you to cut through some of the chaos. But have we started to get into a place where under the wrong hands that we're using data too much and we're not making sound decisions because of it? We're making too fast decisions because of it? Where do you feel like your headspace is with that, Gene?
I don't see that at all. I think that in the business press, there's been a lot of play over the past several years about, data-driven marketers versus non-data-driven marketers. To me, it's always been the same story. The best marketers that I've worked for are the best general managers, and they're the ones who make the soundest business decisions in totality. And by definition, those decisions involve data. You can't make good decisions without data. And so even if those decisions lead to great creativity and other parts of that marketing, the set of components that comprise the discipline of marketing. And so I feel like the story of good marketers is the story of good leaders, which has always been the story of data. It's just that the idea of data is getting more play now because, frankly, in the business press, we're most used to talking about the components of marketing that tend to be advertising or PR related. But those are simply components of building brands and marketing. They're not the totality of marketing.
And
Makes
so,
sense.
and so is it maybe to your point where data used to kind of live out here in the ethers a little bit and you'd yank some reports or some things into a strategy session. Now maybe it really is at the heart of sound decisioning. And if you're the right general manager, you know when to use it for good and when it's not telling you, the stuff you don't need to know.
Absolutely. And I think that the reason why there's been at least one reason why there's been so much back and forth about that topic is because I think professionals who are very good professionals who work in components of marketing or areas of marketing that are less data-driven or not data-driven are very uncomfortable and frankly nervous about the idea that data is important, yet they shouldn't be. Their components of the marketing discipline are still as valid as they always were and still need to be done as well as they always have needed to be. So to me, it's just
it's the foundation, and then you get the creatives that work around that foundation.
Correct.
I think there's some.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think there's some times where there's also just a need to continue to educate yourself as a CMO. Again, all you have to do is read any of the trades. Sometimes that length of tenure, it can be shorter than expected. And maybe there's still a little bit of fear out there of what the data might tell you, and how do you convey that up maybe to a CEO who's who's got sales still siloed. I mean, that still happens out there where sales is siloed for certain companies and they're not maybe working as cohesively as they could or should. Hopefully that continues to evolve. And obviously, maybe you've had pretty good luck at the places you've been.
Well, perhaps. I think I understand the idea of data revealing things that perhaps we're afraid of, but we shouldn't be, because all that's really telling us is that we have the ability to make changes and better decisions sooner. And as long as leaders, we're accepting of the idea that we're evolving and nothing is perfect necessarily out of the box, and we shouldn't be afraid that data reveals that a previous decision was not the right decision. It just means we've got to change course.
Even if it was your own. And perhaps, again, to be more proactive in that conversation rather than reactive makes it a little easier.
I've found consistently in my career it's always better to be proactive. I don't think most leaders like what I call the grand ta-da, where you wait to reveal a problem when you supposedly have a solution for it. Your solution might not be the right one. Bring more people in sooner.
Let's talk about your time at Time Warner for a little bit. So you were at Price Waterhouse, then you left.
Went to business school.
Okay. And where did you go to business school?
University of North Carolina.
How did you like that?
Continuing the sports theme. Loved it. Fantastic school. Great area of the country that
really beautiful.
Really started as a melting pot for different parts of the country back in the 90s, and can't say enough about UNC.
Talk about your time at Time Warner. How'd you end up there? And you spent a little over a decade there.
Yeah, and almost 19 years at Time Warner, and I went to business school knowing that I wanted to work for Time Inc. and Time Warner. And so it was very intentional. I think it probably emanated when I was younger from my thought that I might want to be involved on the creative side of media and journalism, and always had a great affection and respect for the brands of Time Warner and Time Incorporated, and pursued it literally from my first year in business school until I finally got a job there. It was interesting. I tried very hard to get an internship at Time Inc. and Time Warner at the time.
Here in the city?
Yeah, here in the city, because they had just merged. And a really lovely professional by the name of Jane Grenadier ran human resources at the time. And she said, "Gene, you seem like a really nice fella, but we simply don't recruit people from Notre Dame and North Carolina at Time Inc. and Time Warner." At the time, it was very much a white shoe kind of company, and everyone came from the same 5 to 7 schools that the
Harvard and
well, at the time it was largely UPenn, Northwestern, Middlebury, because several of the top executives went to Middlebury, a few other Columbia, a few other schools. And my wife, interestingly enough, ended up getting there by running a program at UNC, and she got recruited by someone there. And the way I ended up at Time Warner was interesting. After we graduated, I was taking a night class at NYU and met someone who worked at Time Inc. who said, "Well, I've got an opening. Would you like to come work for me?" And that's kind of how it got started.
It is funny how still that personal relationship piece can change your life. Still
really
matters.
can.
No matter how much data we look at, no matter how deep we get into that stuff, the computers and the machines can't do all of it.
Absolutely. And Time Incorporated and Time Warner, but Time Incorporated in particular was during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s was one of the places to learn the discipline of performance marketing. Many people don't remember this, but back then it was really, there were 2 places that you'd go to learn performance marketing.
And what
really
do you consider performance marketing? Help give a description of that to some extent.
Any one of the marketing channels and all of them combined where you're executing marketing for return on investment, right? It used to be the old forms of direct marketing, whether it be direct mail, renewals mail, and the like. It still encompasses those forms of CRM, but now it obviously expands and has for many years to all the digital disciplines, usually in an effort to drive some customer actions, whether they be in the immediate term or downstream. Okay. Acquisition and retention primarily. And American Express and Time Inc. were really the 2 places to learn those disciplines, in this country at least.
And do you feel like that's a chunk of what you learned over that time?
Absolutely. Fantastic general management skills, data-driven skills, P&L skills from the earliest stages at Time Inc. and Time Warner, surrounded by really, really smart executives at every level who just went about their business in a really disciplined and smart way. And, many of the people that I worked with at Time Inc. and Time Warner are very successful at other places now. Yeah. Steve Scher at Amazon, Vivek Shah, who, runs a company. Jeff, I could name a long list of people
that have made their way through it, and then they've obviously ended up...
Michael Loeb, who you might be familiar with, started as a Time Inker. And
I had a great interview with him last year. I met his daughter, who's amazing and cool. And it is a small world sometimes, too. And so let's fast forward through that journey a bit. You talked about Amazon. You spent a little bit of time there as well with some interesting stuff. You spent a little chunk at one of the companies called Fresh Direct, which is kind of in that the food space a little bit, which is interesting and competitive. We've got the CMO for Freshly, who's going to be coming on this season, and that's a tough business.
Very hard.
But I want to jump now with some time that we've got. I want to jump into Getty just a bit, and then talk a bit more about kind of where you see the industry moving forward. So in doing some of my research on the brand itself, I thought what was most fascinating to me was just the actual history of the development of Getty Images in the first place. So obviously everybody knows the name Getty. I've been to the Getty Museum and all that stuff, but how it actually formed was one of the sons, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I certainly don't want to speak out of turn, but in essence, one of the sons of one of the brothers or whatever started with another partner. But I think, and maybe you could tell me if I'm wrong, I think it kind of started out of whole cloth, and they bought another company out, and that's kind of how it built.
Well, Mark Getty is the founder of the company, and he's part of the Getty family, and he and Jonathan Klein are the co-founders, and they were both bankers in London, and knew they wanted to form a company, and spent a great deal of time researching different categories of businesses that they might like to be in. And when they finally decided on the visual content business 25 years ago, actually more than 25 years ago, really the company started as a roll-up of regional image-based companies and visual content companies. And one of the original companies that they acquired was Tony Stone. And that a lot of the principles and the leadership principles of the company today actually come from Tony Stone. And so they set about building really the first global visual content company by rolling up a series of regional visual content companies, some of which were very vertically based, like All Sport, others which were more general and editorial based. And then over time, really got into the discipline of researching archives and collections that they should acquire to make the business stronger, more valuable, in the most complete sense. So both creative and editorial. And then along the way, bought iStock, which was based in Calgary. And iStock is our business that's really focused on small to medium-sized businesses. So we've completed the whole visual content chain over these 25 years, from the freelancer, the prosumer, as we sometimes refer to some of those professionals, and small to medium businesses, which is where iStock comes in. And those are typically businesses that want to do most of their work and their business entirely through e-commerce and digital marketing. And then we take those customers through the chain all the way up through the much bigger and more complete offerings that Getty Images has, as some of those companies grow and expand, and their visual content needs expand.
Isn't it amazing to think of just that? You talk about Time Warner and the legacy brand, of a history of a brand, but you have these two guys who could have really gone and done anything, and yet that was a space that they realized that nobody else had really taken either the foresight to pull together or to build, and they did really, to some extent, build it from whole cloth and acquire everything, and how interesting, they ended up selling it at some point, and then the Getty family ended up buying it back. Am I correct?
Correct. So we completed about a year and a half ago a refinancing, and Mark Getty and his family have essentially acquired the Carlyle stake back, and are in control of the company. And I think the company's in very good hands. It's good news not only for the brands, but for the company and the people of the company.
So, and as you talk about that, as you talk about where you guys are now headed, as you've kind of completed that piece of it, you guys again are doing some really interesting things that some people just may not initially kind of think of Getty being a leader in that space. But you're redefining how we view race and people and perceptions of how we view others in other countries. And now you're also layering in data into those pieces as well. So spend a little time talking about that if you can.
Absolutely. So, as you pointed out, Mark and Jonathan really redefined this space by creating this global company. And the mission of the company really has always been to move the world with this visual content. And we do that in a number of ways. And our secret sauce, if you want to look at it that way, is the combination, and I think the very unique combination of really phenomenal visual content in the creative space. And we have a creative team and a curation team that deals with our contributors globally, and their whole mission is to bring in the best creative content for our clients and customers. And then the other big part of our business that really makes us unique is the phenomenal editorial business that we have. And in both components of that business, our goal always has been to move the world, and we do so in a number of ways. It's not just through the huge number of events that we cover editorial every year in the entertainment space, the sports space, news space, but it's through collections that we either create, incentivize to create, or partner with to create that help change perceptions. So we did that most recently with Unilever and Dove for the Show Us campaign and collection. And we've done that through a series of other collections with Lean In, Muslim Girl, Nosotros. So that's part of our mission, is to repicture both, communities within the world as well as, people in the way that really they should be portrayed visually.
You talked about Unilever and a couple of those other brands. So is that part of your role really now as you kind of settle into this new part of your position to some extent, or an evolution to some extent? Is that where some of the growth opportunities are for you guys, for you to be able to work directly with brands and kind of help them with?
Well, it's not just part of my role. It's part of our role collectively at Getty. So, there's a lot of people who touch those relationships. Sometimes those relationships start with our global sales team and the relationships that they have and the conversations they have. Sometimes they start with our communications team, our external communications team. You've met Anne, and
we did.
She fosters a lot of those relationships as well. Often those relationships emanate out of conversations and meetings that we have with our creative team. And that's the team of people that I was referring to, who's responsible for curating the collections, deciding which collections we should acquire, curating the visual content on our websites for our customers. And Dr. Rebecca Swift is a member of that team, and she also helps build a lot of those relationships. And sometimes we do that through regional marketing relationships. So it's an important part of our company's mission. And so what I'm just trying to paint a picture that it's not only my job to help build those relationships. It's really everyone's job, because our company's mission is to move the world. And you can't credibly do that if you're not creating content on the creative side that actually portrays people in the proper and most accurate way. And on the editorial side, if you're not actually capturing the events of the world.
It's interesting to see a company that sells content building their own content to some extent. So you're following your own principles. So
absolutely.
Listen, as we start to wrap this up, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about tons of sports, but I do have a couple of additional questions for you, if you don't mind sticking around for just another minute or two. What do you wish you personally knew more about this marketing industry? What's the thing where you were like, geez, if I just had an extra 48 hours, an extra couple of weeks, an extra month, what do you wish you knew more about?
I mean, the list of things that I wish I knew more about is actually quite long, because I have a long list of weaknesses, for better or for worse. But I think the most important thing is not really a marketing-driven issue. You touched on it earlier in our conversation, and it's about relationships. And it's not just external relationships, but it's internal relationships. I think people underestimate the value of taking the time to build relationships with departments and colleagues that touch the discipline of marketing. I often have heard colleagues and people who work in marketing over the years make statements like, they just don't understand marketing here, or if only I worked for a leader who understood marketing. And I actually think that that's often the wrong conclusion. It's our job as business people, when we have an idea, to construct that idea with the right support and to actually take the time to bring people along the journey. And I think without a doubt, I was absolutely too focused in my career early on pushing my ideas on people as opposed to bringing them along. And I think those relationships are the way that you're going to execute better and more quickly. And it seems counterintuitive because that actually takes time, right? Building those relationships and bringing people along the journey. But that's what actually helps educate your teammates, make your ideas better because they'll have information and ideas that will actually make those ideas better. And so that's what I think I wish I knew more of when I started my career. Not necessarily something you learn in school, but something that some people intuitively know, I think.
And maybe just by experience, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
For me, perhaps it took longer.
Well, look, it's actually a great way to end this episode with a piece of really amazing advice. And it's advice we all know we need to follow sometimes, which is listening sometimes is even better than talking. And
almost always.
Internal relationships are important. Hopefully that comes all the way up and down, not just from the top. Even those that are underneath that may feel like they're not being heard. Sometimes you have to listen to those around you as well and realize that with some experience also comes some knowledge to some extent.
There's no doubt. And if I could go back and tell my younger self who often thought I wasn't heard, I think what I would tell him is the reason maybe you weren't heard is because you didn't take the time to form and shape your idea enough with enough support. Don't just throw out an idea to colleagues without having the support. And that involves a number of things: research, data, information to sell your idea.
There's still a sales element to it. Well, listen, Gene Foca, Chief Marketing Officer at Getty Images, thank you so much for making time. Thanks for being part of our kickoff to season 4. We'll be excited to continue to keep an eye on all of the things that you're doing, especially the stuff that you guys are doing across brand. I find that probably most fascinating to kind of see how you guys can utilize that content and for us to be able to watch how a content company pushes out their own content. So thank you guys very much. Stacy, as always, thank you for being part of the episode. Lisa, thank you for helping us with our recording. And Bill, you could take us out of the show. Hey guys, thank you so much for sticking through this episode of the CMO Suite. We are incredibly excited that many of our guests, as we had previously mentioned, have offered to come back and talk to us a little bit about how life has changed in that really quick 5 or 6 weeks. So, Gene, first of all, again, thank you very much for doing the episode in the first place. It was super fun.
Yeah, great to be here.
I could have spent another hour with you if you had let me, not talking about sports, which obviously we know that you love, but talking about the Getty family. And again, just the whole trajectory of them being able to come in, buy it back, not really even living off of kind of the previous incarnation of the Getty family, but kind of creating just their own thing. The story itself about Getty Images is absolutely fascinating. You guys had several new initiatives that you were starting to roll out, kind of what I'll call pre-COVID. And so I'm just wondering if you don't mind giving us a little bit of a, not a Tiger King recap episode, but at least a little bit of some follow-up on, has anything changed for you guys? Has any of your plans changed kind of moving forward? And if they have, how so?
Well, I mean, obviously, Sean, a lot has changed just given what's going on in the global economy. So we're moving where the customer base is moving, obviously, and there's a lot of upset in the market in different categories of business, and I'm sure that will continue to evolve over the coming weeks and months. So the reality, though, is that we were probably in the top 10 or 15% of companies who were, in many respects, operationally uniquely prepared for this type of thing because of very tight alignment across the management team and some really excellent work done by our Chief Technology Officer, Nate Gandert in Seattle, and his team. And so a year ago, we had started preparing to allow everyone to be able to work remotely by making sure that they were equipped with the right equipment. And because of the unique nature of our organization, we sell in over 65 countries. We have offices in many cities throughout the world. We have 3 major hub offices in London, New York, and Seattle, as well as one in Calgary. We spend much of our working day as a team across the organization already working on Zoom from beginning of the day until the end of the day, adjusting meeting times to accommodate people in Asia Pacific and Australia, New Zealand, and all the rest. And so I won't say in any way, shape, or form that it's business as usual, because that would be ridiculous. But
Sure.
I think our organization because of smart planning that had nothing to do with the global pandemic, was, uniquely situated to, on day one, resume business as usual for the team. And I think as a result, the organization has adjusted very, very well, because in some respects, the adjustment has only been an adjustment to one's personal workspace on a daily basis.
It is, again, interesting just to see where some of that has taken place, where some companies, remote work hasn't been unusual for them. For a lot of us, where you have staffs in big buildings, this certainly is in some ways life changing. But also, again, if you can see some silver lining through the clouds, it has allowed many of us just to either rethink that model or rethink what's important, and realize that Zoom isn't perfect for everything, but there are certainly opportunities to be able to communicate. And look at us, again, I really prefer doing these from our
We
studio
carry
in
on.
LA or New York, but you carry on, you work your way through it. I want to ask you one other question, just again, as we kind of wrap this little bit of this recap. You guys also have been a little bit insulated in some ways in the fact that you are a content company as part of what you do, and content became so critically important, day one of kind of, let's call it March 15th or 16th or whatever, of, okay, this is not the swine flu. This is not something that's happening somewhere else. This is all happening right here and right now. And we better all change our messaging. I know our creative group was probably never busier than they've been over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And in many cases, I would assume that required additional demand in some ways with a lot of the collateral that you guys have out there in the market. Is that a fair assessment?
No, it absolutely is. I mean, obviously, there are pieces of our business that were, hit,
Impacted?
hit a little bit of a pause and impacted more than others. The editorial business, obviously, if there are no major events going on, that's a piece of the business that's
Agreed.
waiting to restart in a more significant way. But certainly, our creative business, which is a huge piece of our business globally, whether it be our video, our images, our vectors, our illustrations, all of that is in demand, and our go to market changes that we began in the back half of last year again have really served us well. Obviously, not with the intent of living through a situation like this,
Yeah.
but having a global customer service organization that can serve our customers around the globe, having a global organization focused on retention of customers, having in place some product changes and product features that have helped serve our customers well, and certainly the additional investment that we had put into digital marketing to reach customers and small businesses and the like, make sure that they're aware that we're clearly here to serve them and ready to go, has all been not only helpful, but has really helped this be a transition that we were very well equipped to deal with.
So adaptivity, really, in some cases, it seems like that's, not the buzzy word, but that's the word that all of us as marketers need to make sure that we're realizing this is it is a different marketplace. You hope that everything comes through this safe and sound. There's definitely still some choppy waters ahead as we figure that all out. But again, it seems as if you guys as a company overall, and you with your marketing team, were able to be at least a little bit ahead of the curve. Fair?
They really have been. Our marketing team has done a phenomenal job of being flexible and adaptable and adjusting their plans and understanding what's going on in the marketplace. And certainly the good plans that we put in place as a marketing team in terms of how to adjust and look forward. I think what we've done really well over these past 2 months is not, get too obsessed with just the immediate term. Obviously, there are issues you have to deal with in the
Yeah,
moment that are important. And first and foremost amongst those is the safety and health of
of
your
course.
team,
Yep.
making sure that they're equipped to deal with family situations, whether they're managing, juggling their children or elderly or whatever the case might be. Those are really significant issues. But I also think that, our CEO did a fantastic job of getting the board aligned right away that we were going to continue with our long-term plans, and we were going to do our best to take advantage of opportunities that could set us up well for when the markets come back in a more significant way, such that we would be absolutely prepared to make sure our customers were getting the kind of product and service that we know they should get, and to really take advantage of the market. And I think all along the way we've had good plans and good support. So I feel like we've taken the right steps for when things begin to come back, however slowly they are. We're ready.
Well, Gene Foca, CMO for Getty Images. Stay safe to you and your family. Once again, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the CMO Suite.
Thanks for hanging out in the CMO Suite. The podcast for marketers who want to be in the know. Presented by Connectivity Holdings.
You're a C-level manager. You shouldn't have to know the difference between behavioral or contextual targeting, but your agency should. Uconnect provides brands and biddable teams direct access to platforms like The Trade Desk, Google, Amazon, Facebook, OTT, and more. Their US-based traders can train your in-house team or provide complete transparency with no minimums and CPM-based service pricing for true transparency. Something Mighty Hive, The Trade Desk, and Centro simply don't offer. Tired of being the smartest one in the room? Reach out to Uconnect today for a free demo. Uconnect, the world's leader in true transparent biddable media.
This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite.